All right, let's dive into something that's often discussed, but maybe not always with the true depth it deserves. We're talking about the intricate and, I think, very cautious role China might play in a potential Iran-Israel conflict. We're going to try to cut through some of the noise today, pull out the key strategic insights from our sources, really want to grasp the complex geopolitical layers at play here. Think of it like maybe laying out a chessboard, piece by piece.
Yeah, and what's truly fascinating about this isn't really the idea of, direct military intervention, because frankly, that seems pretty much off the table for Beijing. Instead, it's much more subtle, a kind of shadow play, if you will. We're looking at decisions driven purely by cold, hard strategic calculations. It's not about ideology here. It really is all about Beijing's self-interest and their longer-term global objectives.
Right. And when we talk about China's involvement, it seems crucial to understand just how cautious, how indirect it would likely be.
Hmm.
Our sources point to some, well, surprisingly discreet methods for this kind of support. We're talking about things like dual-use tech transfers, so equipment like drones, maybe satellite navigation systems, stuff that has both civilian and military applications.
Exactly, that kind of plausible deniability. And then you have ammunition supply chains, potentially routed, quietly, maybe via partners like Pakistan or perhaps even North Korea. And we shouldn't forget the cyber angle either, sharing cyber capabilities or intelligence infrastructure, all designed to operate well below the radar.
Okay, below the radar. But to be absolutely clear then, China won't go all in, not in any direct military sense.
Oh, emphatically not. Beijing has this profound aversion to direct military entanglements, especially when you consider forces allied with the U.S., like Israel, are involved. That's a red line for them, it seems. Their core priorities are just fundamentally different. They really value regional stability, primarily for their energy security, and perhaps even more importantly these days, for the huge investments they've made with the Belt and Road Initiative, especially across the Persian Gulf. So disrupting that with any overt military action, it would simply be counterproductive to their main goals.
But doesn't that sound a bit, well, contradictory? If China values stability so highly for BRI and energy, what's the calculation? Why take the risk of even this subtle interference? What are the real sort of underlying strategic motivations driving these potential actions?
That's a great question, and it seems to boil down to three primary strategic calculations. First, China is definitely keen to erode, or at least chip away at, U.S. hegemony in the Middle East. Weakening Israel's position, even indirectly, even subtly, undermines U.S. dominance in the region.
Oh,
And look, a prolonged Iran-Israel conflict, it serves a very clear purpose for China from that perspective. It diverts American attention, American resources away from the Indo-Pacific, which is, let's face it, Beijing's #1 priority theater. It's a strategic distraction.
makes sense. A geopolitical diversion. What's the second calculation?
Second, it's fundamentally about securing those vital energy corridors. You see, China imports a huge amount of oil from the Middle East. We're talking approximately 40% of its total oil imports. And Iran is a major supplier within that. Because of sanctions, Iran often offers oil at, significantly discounted rates.
Right, the sanctions discount.
Exactly. So from China's viewpoint, a stronger, or at least a surviving, Iran means less U.S. control over China's critical energy lifelines.
Okay, energy security. And the third point.
The third ties directly into China's broader, longer-term de-dollarization efforts, specifically enhancing yuan-based oil trade, the so-called petro-yuan. Supporting Iran aligns perfectly with this goal. It helps push yuan-based energy deals. In fact, back in 2023, Iran already agreed to settle part of its oil trade in yuan.
I remember reading about that.
Yeah, and China is very keen to scale this model, to push it across other sanctioned states. It's about chipping away at the dollar's global dominance, one oil barrel at a time.
So let's connect this back for everyone listening. Why should you care about something like the petro-yuan or these energy corridors? It's easy to see it as abstract, maybe distant finance or trade routes, but it's really about fundamental shifts in global economic power. These actions show how countries are actively trying to reshape the very foundations of international trade and influence, and that directly impacts global stability, power dynamics, everything really. Now, we touched on how China's support might flow through unexpected channels, and that brings us to a really crucial piece in this puzzle, a player you might not immediately think of as central, Pakistan.
Right. Which raises an important question. Why Pakistan? Why would they be such a key route or maybe partner in this complex equation? Well, first, just look at the map. Pakistan holds a hugely strategic location bordering Iran, and it shares a deep decades-long military-industrial relationship with China. That's key.
The China-Pakistan relationship, yeah.
On top of that, you have all this Chinese-funded infrastructure,
Right.
particularly the Gwadar port and the China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, CPEC. That gives China critical logistical access down to the Arabian Sea. It's essentially a ready-made transit hub if they needed one.
So infrastructure and location. What's in it for Pakistan, though? What are their potential gains?
Well, for Pakistan, this kind of involvement could offer significant potential upsides, at least on paper. They could try to leverage this Chinese-Iranian dependence to extract economic concessions, maybe military aid. It also positions Pakistan to potentially play the role of regional mediator or perhaps an arms conduit, which could give them considerable influence, maybe even over traditional Gulf Arab rivals like Saudi Arabia.
That's a fascinating strategic position for them to be in, potentially. But surely, with that potential comes some really significant risks for Pakistan.
Oh, absolutely massive risks. They could face immediate U.S. and Israeli retaliation. Think crippling sanctions. And beyond that direct pressure, there's a strong risk of, well, further alienation from key Gulf allies, Saudi Arabia, the UAE, and critically, from international financial institutions, the IMF, the World Bank. Pakistan relies heavily on them for its economic stability, so it's an incredibly fine line they'd be walking, a real gamble.
A high wire act, definitely. So given this intricate shadow play, as you called it, is the West watching this angle? How aware are intelligence agencies of these potential under-the-radar activities?
Oh, absolutely. Without a doubt. Western intelligence agencies are on high alert for this sort of thing. U.S. intelligence, for example, is known to be closely monitoring those CPEC corridors. They're using satellite tracking for Chinese cargo, scrutinizing dual-use exports with intense focus.
And Israel.
Well, Israeli cyber units are, let's say, particularly vigilant, especially about any Iranian use of Chinese components in their drones and UAV technology. UAVs, unmanned aerial vehicles, for anyone unfamiliar, that's a major concern for them. And it's not just the West either. India, remember, is an Israeli ally, and India is a regional counterweight to both Pakistan and China. They're also tracking these developments very, very closely.
Okay, so there's awareness. What are the broader, maybe long-term implications of these dynamics for the U.S. and Israel specifically? What does this mean for their own strategic calculus?
For the U.S., I think there's a real risk here of losing its sort of uncontested influence in the Middle East. That era might be fading. The potential for a deepening triangle, if you like, of China, Iran, Russia, that could significantly challenge the U.S.-led sanctions architecture, the system that underpins a lot of global finance. And the U.S. might also find itself dragged deeper into a messy regional conflict, which again serves as a major distraction from those critical Indo-Pacific priorities, like Taiwan. It's a classic geopolitical mine.
A bind, yeah. And for Israel.
For Israel, the implications are, well, equally serious, maybe even more immediate. They face the growing risk of a multi-front war, fighting Iranian proxies who are emboldened, potentially better equipped by this external support. Imagine Iranian missiles and drones being upgraded with Chinese technology, maybe even advanced AI-guided UAVs down the line. That makes them far more lethal, far harder to defend against.
A nightmare scenario for Israeli defense planners.
Absolutely. And it might even prompt Israeli preemptive strikes, perhaps against Iranian logistics nodes, maybe in Pakistan or even beyond, which could, of course, trigger an even wider, more dangerous escalation, a risk spiral quickly.
So, pulling all these threads together, it really does paint a picture of an incredibly complex geopolitical chessboard. Every player seems to have multiple potential moves, countermoves, risks, rewards.
Indeed. It's worth maybe quickly summarizing the roles and stakes, just to clarify. You've got China potentially making indirect arms and tech transfers, probably via Pakistan. Their gains, undermining U.S. influence, expanding yuan oil trade. The risks, blowback from the U.S. and Israel, plus potential Gulf instability messing with their investments.
Okay, China's role.
Then Pakistan, acting as that crucial logistics and perhaps arms route. Potential gains involve leveraging its position with both China and Iran, maybe gaining regional influence. But the risks are huge. Alienation from the West, from key Arab states, and severe economic fallout.
Right, Pakistan's gamble.
Iran obviously receives advanced support, helps it maybe circumvent sanctions, strengthen its hand against Israel. But the inherent risk for Iran is drawing even more severe international retaliation if things go wrong.
And the U.S. and Israel.
Finally, yeah, the U.S. and Israel, they're focused on containment, on escalation management. Their goal, their gain, is maintaining regional dominance, keeping Iran in check. But the significant risk is getting pulled into a devastating multi-front war, which diverts resources and attention from elsewhere.
It really underscores how intricate and interdependent global politics is. Every action, no matter how subtle it seems, how deniable, it has ripple effects. Across continents, across power structures, it's constantly reshaping the balance.
It really is. And perhaps this raises an important final question for you, for everyone listening to consider. How might this increasing reliance on subtle, indirect methods of support and influence in global conflicts, how might that fundamentally reshape our understanding of what alliances even mean anymore? And what does warfare itself actually look like in the 21st century if it's fought increasingly in the shadows?